Chelsea. You know, you might recognize them from being the club that I do make fun of quite a bit here and on stream. Well, guess what? We're here to do it again, but in new and surprising ways, because today it's been made a little bit more difficult to make fun of Chelsea. After all, they are closing in on Manchester United in the Premier League standings, and they are generally putting more points on the board, and Cole Palmer has emerged as a legitimate star. That continued today, because in case you were under a rock today, Chelsea did win 6-0 against Everton, and Cole Palmer scored 4 of those goals. He scored a hat trick in 29 minutes, and he also scored a penalty in the 64th minute. Nicholas Jackson scored in the 44th. Gilchrist scored in the 90th. I don't know who he is, but I could only assume that they spent $100 million on him in the offseason, or maybe even January if they're lucky. But the real interesting point, and the way that I am still able to make fun of Chelsea today, is this penalty that Cole Palmer scored. Because a lot of things about Chelsea are going right. I've always been a believer in Pochettino. I think he's a very good coach that can build a culture. I like the transfer strategy that Chelsea's applied. I think it's creative, it's risk-taking, it's what I do on Football Manager. It's hoard a bunch of young, talented players and then hope that somehow that just magically produces a team that can instantly win the league. That's obviously not happening this season, but the idea persists, right? The concept is there. Except it doesn't really seem to be working. The question so many people have been asking, right, is how a team that is talented enough to show up and beat Everton 6-0, that is talented enough to have billions, plural, of dollars spent on it. I think it's only 1 point something billion, but you get the idea. Anytime billion is involved, we're talking about serious numbers, serious cheddar, serious bacon. And anytime you spend that amount of money on a player, you know that player has to be at least pretty good, unless that player's name is Anthony. So Chelsea's got talented players on its team. What could possibly be the problem? Well, I propose for your consideration the debacle that was Chelsea's penalty. I remind you that Chelsea is winning 4-0 heartily into the second. We're not just fresh out of the dressing room either. Comfortably in the second half, right? Cole Palmer has his hat trick. Nicholas Jackson has a goal. It's 4-0 halfway through the second half, and Chelsea wins a penalty. It's the minute of nonsense that happens after that I'm going to be totally straight up with you. Not only does it show why Chelsea has been struggling so much to actually win or play up to its talent, it's kind of hard to believe. I mean, maybe in a more pressure-packed situation, but it's 4-0. They're playing arguably their best game of the season. And it's all over this fight for the ball. We'll start here, because the penalty is won, and Noni Madueke and Nicholas Jackson both go after Malo Gusto to get the ball. I mean, they really go after him there. And Noni Madueke is making it very clear in no uncertain terms that he's the one that should be taking the penalty, right? And Nicholas Jackson is hanging around. Malo Gusto seems to be in a situation where he is attempting to defuse the situation. But we're only 10 seconds in here. Things are about to spice up. So let me hit play. Noni Madueke seems for the moment like he's got this. Nicholas Jackson is now pulling away from Malo Gusto. We have two guys that clearly want to take the penalty. There's just one problem. Chelsea's had the same penalty taker for almost the entire year, and his name is Cole Palmer. He's not even in this picture yet, and you already know because I spoiled it for you. He's the guy that ends up scoring this penalty. So how the hell do we get there? Well, introducing our first plot twist. And after a few more seconds of Noni Madueke and Nicholas Jackson being entirely too animated, Thiago Silva shows up. You know, the 87-year-old Brazilian center back who's got enough gravitas and experience to fill up an entire field. He comes down into this childish debate like a parent on the playground at the sand pit, and he tries to break things up. He's got Nicholas Jackson by the head. He's got Noni Madueke around the neck here. Madueke's trying to get away from him. Malo Gusto's trying to get onto Nicholas Jackson, who at this point has decided that 2 hands on the back of his head is too much to bear, so he's going to try and slip out of it and fix his socks instead and step away. At this point, it seems that Nicholas Jackson has at least been convinced, probably by the force of the hands in the back of his head, to give up his quest to win this penalty. But Noni Madueke continues to stand tall in the face of the judgment of his elders, or in the case of Thiago Silva, somebody that's basically old enough to be his father. Don't get me wrong with all the age jokes. I actually love and respect Thiago Silva a lot for the fact that he's able to still play at this level, and the fact that the captain of Brazil's national team, or at least the guy that was the captain of Brazil's national team, somebody with that kind of gravitas can't completely diffuse this situation is a sign at just how deep this entire thing actually goes. But we continue, because we are only 31 seconds in. Noni Madueke has at this point beaten off Thiago Silva. Wait. Phrasing. He has warded off Thiago Silva and seems to have the penalty for himself. And if you were watching this video for the first time, then you'd think that was the case. But at that point, Conor Gallagher shows up. Now, Conor Gallagher might not have the old wise gravitas of Thiago Silva, but he does have something else important. He's the captain. In case you didn't know, I honestly didn't really know that until we came right into this situation where Gallagher actually has to flex that mighty muscle of his on his left arm. And he comes in and he starts grabbing Noni Madueke, at which point Cole Palmer, after 40 seconds of brouhahaing, has seemingly noticed that there's a penalty being taken. And Cole Palmer is the designated penalty taker on this team, which makes the way Noni Madueke is acting even more insane. Like, this is going against the coach's wishes. This is going against the way the whole team is set up. You've also got a guy who's on a hat trick. It was Noni Madueke and Nicholas Jackson that were going after it. But it's Noni Madueke who's really dug his heels in here and actually tries to shield the ball from Cole Palmer. He puts it behind his back like you do at the school. Like, you're doing this on the playground to try and prevent that one kid you don't like from actually getting his hands on the ball. Then Gallagher just kind of steals it from him. I don't think Noni Madueke is giving him the ball. He seems surprised by that, at which point Nicholas Jackson just spawns back in. I mean, look at this. He just appears, and he tries to grab it from Cole Palmer. He's like a hyena lurking around a lion's kill, and the moment it's out of Madueke's hands, he thinks he's got a chance again. Maybe he just really doesn't like Cole Palmer or disagrees with what Gallagher is doing and giving the penalty to Cole Palmer, but Nicholas Jackson has gone from not a main character to right back in the ensemble cast here. He is now battling with Cole Palmer. Palmer is trying to line up to take a penalty for their team, by the way. This is the sort of nonsense you'd expect from, one of the great dark arts teams like Argentina or Atletico Madrid, where they're doing this to the other team in front of the penalty spot. No, Chelsea's doing it to themselves. This is just A+ nonsense. This makes no sense. And might I remind you, the game is still 4-0. At which point Cole Palmer is trying to set up for the penalty while Conor Gallagher just shoves. He doesn't actually shove him, but wards off and kind of dispatches Noni Madueke and Nicholas Jackson, who continue to protest this penalty vigorously. Need I remind you, the score is 4-0, and Cole Palmer is perfect on penalties this year and has a hat trick already. And then Cole Palmer is able to set things up, and of course, he scores the penalty. But this makes absolutely no sense. This is Bush League. I'll say it because I don't think Mauricio Pochettino can, although we will get to what he said after the match, because of course, even though they won 6-0, this is the first thing they got asked about. And Pochettino seemed to know that this was a problem. He subbed out Noni Madueke 8 minutes after the penalty went in. He also subbed out Nicholas Jackson, and he subbed out Cole Palmer, just to be fair. But he made a point of subbing out Noni Madueke first, I would imagine. I have to believe that's not entirely a coincidence with Noni Madueke standing up to do this. Pochettino does make clear in his post-match press conference that Cole Palmer is the designated penalty taker, which just makes this just so unbelievable. I mean, a lot of the pundits were calling this childish, but to be perfectly honest, I couldn't imagine a guy like Lamine Yamal doing this, and that guy is a literal child, right? I think, obviously this is some discord in the team. These guys don't get along. They don't like each other, and they're taking a bit of a mercenary attitude towards it. I think Noni Madueke is a great player. I think Nicholas Jackson is just starting to scratch the surface of his potential. I'm not making large, sweeping commentaries like these guys aren't going to go on to have massive, successful careers. But this was weird. There's no way to beat around the bush on this fact. This was very weird and very unsettling if I'm a Chelsea fan, given the fact the score is 4-0. The club has a very clear designated penalty taker, and yet, despite the protestations of two various team leaders, from Thiago Silva to Conor Gallagher, it was still a massive fracas. Now, they will come around on the back end and say that these sorts of disagreements, they happen on the field of battle, and you got to be the man in the arena to understand. I mean, I play rec league soccer. We have no sorts of disagreements like this. I know the pressure is a lot lower, but I mean, I played organized soccer through the level of high school. I've never seen anything like this. And I'm going to be honest, if I did see something like this on my team, I'd feel very awkward, right? Especially with all the language barriers and cultural misunderstandings that can happen on something like a Premier League squad. I'd feel incredibly uncomfortable. This is weird. It's uncomfortable, right, to have this sort of argument. And now you've got to wonder, how Noni Madueke and Nicholas Jackson, to a lesser extent, are going to be handled, what the relationship with Cole Palmer is like, which could be very detrimental to them because Cole Palmer is now the chosen boy at Chelsea based off the way he's played this year. But I'll tell you something I really liked. The way Mauricio Pochettino explained why Cole Palmer was his penalty taker. Because he gives like a 2-minute answer in the video I'm going to pull from. But this particular part of the answer stood out because he says, look, Cole Palmer's the penalty taker. I'm going to talk to the guys about it because that's unacceptable. You know, he called it childish behavior, but he had a very interesting reason as to why Cole Palmer's the penalty taker that kind of it ruins the tough guy bravado of Noni Madueke and Nicholas Jackson trying to take the penalty when they're already up 4-0.
We need to remember also when it was a very difficult situation, remember Burnley, penalty. No one wanted to take, and he was and took the ball and showed the personality. From there, he started to, be the who take the penalty.
That is, I think, a very reasoned take from a coach here. He's referencing a penalty earlier in the season. He says the penalty against Burnley, right? And he says nobody wanted to take it. Cole Palmer walked up and took the ball, and he showed that personality and that confidence to take the ball and score it. And that is a great way to kind of cut off Nicholas Jackson and Noni Madueke at the knees, kind of bring them back down to size here without actually going after them. Because what he's saying is, you guys really desperately want to take this penalty when we're up 4-0 to pad your stats, but when nobody wanted to take the penalty, when it really, really mattered, this was the guy who stepped up to take it, and he has consistently delivered for us since, and that is why he's the penalty taker. And like I said, he went on to make it very clear that if this happens again, there's going to be massive repercussions. So it's not like he was completely passive in his answers to these questions, but I think he handled it well. He handled it as well as he could, and he obviously lamented the fact that this shouldn't be the first question after you win 6-0. This video should not be about this. It should be about the fact that Chelsea won 6-0, or maybe there's no video at all because it's just an impressive Chelsea win that I've got nothing to talk about in it. But instead, we're sitting here talking about the fact that Chelsea had a giant argument over who was going to take a meaningless penalty in the final 26 minutes of a game. And if that doesn't just perfectly display a lack of cohesion and a lack of positive locker room atmosphere, I don't know what else does. I mean, it's just a perfect example of how to take a bunch of talented individuals and just not develop that good feeling and that cohesion that actually allows you to succeed. I mean, I legitimately think the biggest difference between a team like Chelsea and even a team like Aston Villa, maybe even a team like Liverpool, if you go beyond that, the single biggest difference would be the fact that those teams really get along. They're all pulling in the same direction. They understand their tactical identity. And then you have Chelsea that doesn't, that has much more expensive players and players that are rated with much higher ceilings that can't, particularly in Aston Villa. I mean, that's just what makes all the difference in the world. I think Pochettino's the type of manager that can create that, but he's going to need time. And not all of these guys are going to be here when this team finally starts clicking. That's just the truth.